Well, Sir Alex Ferguson became the biggest name so far to be culled from Manchester United's wage bill. His £2 million a year ambassador role has been cut. This is part of a wider cost saving series of measures implemented by Sir Jim Radcliffe and his INEOS team. There's been an outcry from fans and former players. Eric Cantona said it showed a lack of respect. And an anonymous player said this, along with other long-standing behind-the-scenes team members being made redundant, has ripped the soul out of the club. Now, Mark and Rob, you looked into how Manchester United are still a bit of a mess, even since INEOS have taken over. We'll discuss the wider issues in a moment, but first on Sir Alex, Mark, £2 million a year saving when others are being let go. It seems like an obvious move if you take all the emotion out of it, or is it just a massive PR own goal given Fergie's legendary status at the club?
Well, it's probably a bit of both. I mean, it's been a PR on goal and how it's been handled, but I think it's the right decision. I think, when he stepped down as manager in 2013, it was announced that he was going to be an ambassador on his £2 million a year role. And that was just a ridiculous waste of money at the time. And it still is because, Sir Alex Ferguson doesn't need to be paid £2 million a year to represent Man United, really. I mean, let's look at what happened to Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. Left straight away, no issues whatsoever. Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, left straight away, no issues whatsoever. So why does Sir Alex Ferguson, despite all the success he brought to Man United, merit this £2 million a year retainer, basically? That's 22.
Let me come back on that
Okay.
because I think the two comparisons. Klopp has walked away from that job because he feels he's exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that he would have some sort of ambassadorial role or stay connected to the club, he clearly wanted a clean break. And let's be honest, as much as Arsenal tried to dress it up, Wenger was sacked. So they're never going to keep Wenger around either. Whereas Fergie went out, they never wanted him to go. He went out as a Premier League winner. And they see him as being, somebody who has an added value. And look, you guys will know better than me that he's getting paid £2 million a year as an ambassadorial role, but is he not advising on players? Is he not still trying to sign?
Well, if he is,
involved in
if he is advising and he has been, then again he deserves to have his money removed because they haven't signed many good players in the last 10 years and they've chosen pretty average managers. So if he's been involved in the decision-making process, then he hasn't earned his money. If he's not been involved in the decision-making process, then it's £2 million a year to shake hands and just say nice things about Man United. So again, I don't see the value. I mean, the cynic in me might suggest that the Glazers paid him £2 million a year so that it would not be off the books, and then it would make it less likely that he would criticise the Glazers once he's out of the club. So, Sir Matt Busby was kept on at United over the years, Bobby Charlton as well in ambassadorial roles. I'm sure they were paid for it, but I think £2 million a year is excessive, considering, even without the redundancies recently, that obviously 250 people lost their jobs. £2 million a year, that could keep 20, 30, 40 people in work. It may still do. The savings on this may keep other people in jobs, or it could have kept other people in jobs. Now, I know people, I'm sure Rob does as well, that have left the club in recent weeks. They've been there over 20 years and they've been let go pretty ruthlessly, quickly without any kind of reason beyond the fact that they've been there a long time and they need to make cuts. So I think Sir Alex Ferguson leaving, the Cantona stuff for me is just a nonsense. I mean, that's just a soundbite. It doesn't rip the soul out of the club. Sir Alex Ferguson hasn't been sacked. He's just been told you're not getting £2 million a year anymore at 82. He can still watch games. He can still entertain people there. They're never going to say to Sir Alex, yeah, you can come today, but it's going to cost you £100 for 2 tickets. That's never going to happen. So I think it's the right move, and it shows a bit of getting away from the sentimentality that United have kind of been hampered by in the last 10 years. It's so long since Sir Alex left, but everything refers back to Sir Alex. What would Sir Alex do? This, that, and the other. Well, the reason why United are probably struggling right now is because they're constantly banging on about what would Sir Alex have done. It's a different game. It's a different era. Pep Guardiola's shown that at Man City. Klopp has shown it at Liverpool. Now, Liverpool, I suppose, they were accused of maybe 20, 25 years of, living in the past. And it took Klopp to arrive to get out of that. Well, United are still living in the past, but maybe the decision on Sir Alex Ferguson is the first sign that they're moving on from the past and they can start looking to the future, because the Sir Alex Ferguson days are not coming back. And that £2 million a year could be put to much better use than him just sitting in the director's box waving at people.
Rob, do you think that having Fergie there every week, and when they're losing, there's a cut to the stands, there's Sir Alex sat alongside David Gill or, somebody else from a sort of bygone era, is that actually having a negative effect on each manager that has tried to succeed him in the last 10 years? And would it actually benefit them? the man, Eric Ten Hag, obviously the man in position at the moment, if he wasn't there all the time, and there wasn't, as Olley says, this sort of constant throwback to the glory days and this reference point who sat above you, facing a stand that's named after him, and that constant sort of reminder of him being there, or is it actually a useful commodity to have, a useful tool, to have someone with that experience, with those connections, so plugged into the club still on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a valid debate. I mean, I don't think that it's helped the managers that have come since Sir Alex Ferguson that he's been so present all the time. Now, I remember speaking to someone at United even before Sir Alex Ferguson left, that they were talking about a sort of the scenario about what would happen when Fergie retired, and the one thing that he had said that most people had said was there needs to be some kind of clean break. It can't just be that you have Fergie now hovering over everything else, because it's going to be difficult enough for anyone to take over after what Fergie did. But then to have him sort of sat behind you when things aren't going well was always going to be difficult. And I've seen similar situations, on a smaller scale at lower league clubs where a manager's moved on to a different job, but just kept coming back and sat in the director's box behind this new manager. It just doesn't help. And there was a situation under Solskjaer, I think, where Solskjaer had dropped Ronaldo for a game against Everton, and they'd drawn, and then someone had caught. There was a video clip of the director's box where someone had asked Fergie about the decision, about Solskjaer's decision to drop Ronaldo, and Fergie just off the cuff had said something like, "Oh no, you can't do that. You always have to pick your best players." And then this clip gets out in the media, and it becomes this huge storm. Then that Solskjaer is then asked in his next press conference about, Fergie didn't really like that decision. What do you think? And then Solskjaer is immediately on the back foot because you can't criticise Fergie, but he's kind of got to stand up for his own decision. It just creates this thing around that you just don't really need. I think Fergie has been useful since he's retired in terms of, he meets a lot of young players. He is still a draw. It's still, a big deal for these young players to come and meet Fergie and learn about the club that Fergie essentially built.
Rob, just on
in the
that,
80s.
just on that, which of those players that he's met have actually delivered? So he didn't get Jude Bellingham over the line. They didn't sign Erling Haaland. So the two ones that they would have wanted, they didn't get. So I kind of take exception a bit. So I don't really see what Sir Alex Ferguson's brought to Man United in the last 10 years. Don't get me wrong, he's been the most successful manager of the club's history, Premier League history maybe, but for the last 10, 12 years, he's brought no value to the club in terms of the modern day. He hasn't, his time is in the past. And I remember the David Moyes season, and obviously it was a bad season, but every time they had a setback, Fergie was sat in the director's box, the cameras were panning for a reaction. And that isn't his fault, but it certainly didn't help David Moyes. And you'd have thought maybe, I know he went on a cruise for about 3 months, so he'd stay at the picture, but he came back, and you'd have thought that he might have thought, something, I'm just going to stay away for a couple of years because my presence here is not going to be helpful. He wouldn't have liked it. He wouldn't have liked, an old predecessor hovering over his shoulder. It's just, he'd be the first one to clear it out. So, and I think a lot of people that aren't kind of aligned to Man United don't understand that Sir Alex Ferguson is not a universally popular figure amongst Man United fans. A lot of Man United fans still blame him for the Glazers taking over the club. So, Sir Alex Ferguson was embroiled in a situation with the owners of a racehorse, the Rock of Gibraltar, maybe 25 years ago. And it got very nasty to the point where, John Magnier and JP McManus, the owners, started buying up shares in Man United to put pressure on Sir Alex Ferguson to back off his decision to try and chase ownership of this horse. In the end, Magnier and McManus sold their shares to the Glazers, which helped the Glazers get over the line. So, but for Sir Alex Ferguson having invested in this horse, or having this connection with this horse and these two Irish racehorse owners, the Glazers may never have become Man United's owners. And we know that Man United fans, to a man and a woman, do not like the Glazers. So Sir Alex Ferguson's legacy at Man United is a great one, but it's tainted by that. And I think a lot of fans will, certainly older fans, will say that he opened the door for the Glazers to come in. So the fact that he's been getting £2 million a year from the Glazers since doesn't sit well with many people. So yes, a lot of fans are upset what they think is ripping the heart out of the club. But I think if they look beneath the surface, it's not really that, to be honest. He's still going to be at games, so I don't see an issue with it.
You clearly can't stay on $2 million a year when you're making, people in the ticket office redundant, people who are on sort of 20, 25, 30 grand a year who have been there for 15 years. I mean, clearly to have Sir Alex Ferguson there on $2 million a year is unsustainable. I think a lot of fans maybe would have, in a perfect world, obviously, like, you don't have to make that big a decision. I think perhaps that the reason they are making that decision is evidence of how bad the financial situation is at Man United. The INEOS and Sir Jim Radcliffe are having to come in and cut a lot of costs. They did have a bloated workforce. They are making a loss. They make these huge revenues, but are still reporting losses. There is an awful lot of work to do there at Man United, really dirty work. No one wants to make people redundant, I don't think. No one enjoys it, clearly. But these are decisions that have to be made, because the end goal of the INEOS regime is to get United back to the top of English and European football. And I think, perhaps they underestimated the task when they first became interested in Man United. I think that, having been there for a couple of months, they've seen how bad that financial situation is. And, would it be nice for Fergie to sit there on an ambassadorial role for forever? Well, yeah, obviously. But these are just decisions that are having to be made now because of what's gone before. The situation at Man United is perhaps worse, particularly financially, than I think maybe a lot of fans realise.
Now we've written Fergie off as a corporate shill. I did want to just slightly reframe that, though, on the back of what Mark just said about the sort of, quite right, the context about the Glazers and the Rock of Gibraltar. Do you think there's any part of this that is a little bit of a power play from INEOS, in terms of, if we're saying that effectively Fergie had kind of free reign to come and go as he pleased on his $2 million a year, and the Glazers, gave him that freedom, because that's sort of the argument, isn't it? That the trade-off here was that the Glazers came in, and yes, they took over the club, but they kind of left Fergie to kind of run it how he wanted to run it. And that has maybe bled into the post-Fergie era, where he's still allowed to kind of have free reign at Old Trafford and to go where he wants to go and say what he wants to say. Is this INEOS kind of clipping his wings because they're still trying to wrestle control of the club at all levels from the Glazer era, and kind of consign that Glazer era to history?
I think INEOS have basically wrestled the control of the club from the Glazers anyway. When they completed their investment, it was sold as they were running football operations. Well, by making people redundant in the club is way beyond football operations. Their remit seems to cover everything. So they seem to have taken a grip of it all, and the Glazers appear to be quite happy to sit back and just watch it happen, and be absolved of the blame a little bit, and just watch the club growing value as over the years it will do, whether it's successful or not. So what I do think is that, since Jim Ratcliffe told Sir Alex Ferguson face to face, so it was done properly. I just think it's a case of, look, the whole club has had to have a complete reset, and they've looked at every aspect of what's been going wrong, what's been going right. And it's just an anomaly that this ex-manager that's been retired for over 10 years is still getting paid £2 million a year. And it's like, this has to stop. An ambassador doesn't really do much for the Man United. We all know that Sir Alex Ferguson's the greatest manager the club's ever had, and a great ambassador for the Premier League. But I think INEOS have done the right thing, and I'm not quite sure it reflects on the Glazer ownership. He probably just says that it shines a light on what the Glazers wasted, from Ed Woodward onwards, that if they've wasted £2 million a year on Sir Alex Ferguson, we know that they wasted a lot of money on dividends to the Glazer siblings that were owned, that were directors, and interest payments over the years. You're probably looking at about between 50 and 100 million pounds that's gone out of the club due to the Glazer ownership for different reasons, and the Ferguson money is a small fraction of that. But if INEOS are going through that with a fine-tooth comb and plugging all those gaps, then fair play. That's what they need to do. And like Rob says, for Man United to be in a financial situation, considering how much money they make, is ridiculous. And INEOS have to find a way to plug those gaps. But again, points made by fans who were angry at this, and some support of it, will say that you're laying people off. You're laying people off that are on 25, 30 grand a year. That's proper, normal jobs. At some point, a lot of the players are going to be looking at their wages and think, am I earning this? And probably not. So it's the players that now have to deliver, because a lot of those are on vastly inflated wages, again, due to the Glazer largesse.
And some of the players have been quite embarrassed by some of this. In the way INEOS have badged this is that all of these cost-cutting measures, the aim of everything that they've done is to improve performance on the pitch. So every time that they've done these round of redundancies or delivered bad news, it's always been about, this, we have to do this because we need United to win the Premier League again and win the Champions League. And it's not gone unnoticed within the squad. A lot of the squad are a little bit embarrassed that, basically they're being made to feel like they're the beneficiaries of all these people being made redundant. And the big elephant in the room with all of this is that the players haven't performed. Players on huge salaries, on huge contracts, just haven't performed. And there are a lot of Man United, of the workforce, particularly those who have been made redundant, saying, well, why are you looking at my 30 grand a year wage when you've got Anthony, say, on 90 grand a week, who has come in for 100 million euros, who clearly hasn't performed? Maybe you should be looking at that area instead of looking at the ticket office or the media department or the marketing people. And it's a valid point. United have wasted an awful lot of money over the years. The workforce has been a little bit bloated, and perhaps they have hired too many people for jobs that could be done by sort of one or two people. That's probably fair enough. But also, you need to look at the squad. So much money has been wasted on really poor players who haven't performed. The reason Man United haven't been good for the last 10 years is not because they've had 3 too many people in the ticket office. It's because they've wasted money on really average players who haven't performed. And that's an issue that they're still dealing with now. You can make Fergie redundant or axe his ambassadorial role as many times as you want, but you need to look at the squad and you need to get value for money in the players that you're buying, because that's the biggest reason Man United have been poor for the last 10 years. It's nothing to do with the ticket office. It's to do with the players they've signed, the money they've wasted, the players who have come in who are just not at the right standard. Until that's fixed, United are still going to run into problems.
One of the lines in our piece, and it was about the lack of a flight back from London after the FA Cup final. So the club did not put on a flight back to Manchester for the players. And the players weren't happy about it, and they complained, and they basically told INEOS, if you don't sort a plane back to Manchester, we'll pay for it ourselves. So we use that in the piece. The reality is that United stayed down. They had a party after the cup final. They travelled back, and the players had an option to travel back on the train on the Sunday morning. It wouldn't have been like sat in standard class with everybody else. It would have been a private carriage in first class. So let's put that straight. So the club had actually catered for the players. Now that line was in our piece, and the reaction to it on social media is quite interesting. That basically accusing the wrong word. It is social media, so I can take it with a pinch of salt. Accusing us of basically putting the players' point of view and why we're defending the players. Well, the reality is we weren't defending the players. You can read that two ways. You can read that as INEOS cost-cutting, or you can read that as the players, once again, not taking any responsibility for anything, moaning about everything that comes their way. Players demanding a flight back to Manchester, a 20-minute flight back to Manchester, and threatening to purchase their own plane to do it. Well, that could be the players that behaving like prima donnas that aren't performing. So look at it two ways, but INEOS perhaps should have put a plane on for the players. They have taken them to London to work for the club, but they're looking at every area to try and plug the gaps and make United competitive again. I think I'm surprised at how messy it's been the last 6 months. I did expect INEOS to have a better impact than this, but I'm beginning to think about maybe it's going to take a year to get all this nasty work out of the way. And should we judge INEOS in a year's at the end of the season maybe and say, look, you've got all the horrible work out of the way, you've got people off the books, it's not been nice, but at the end of the season the club may be in a better position in terms of the day-to-day running of the club, but also in terms of player contracts. So perhaps it's going to take longer than anyone thought. Maybe at the end of the season, so the club is on a sound footing again and looks more of a professional outfit, that they can move forward. And this is just part of the nasty element of getting to that point.
Just finally on this, is there any sense from either of you about how Sir Alex Ferguson's taken this news? Has he accepted that,
Well, he went to watch Aberdeen on Saturday, so that suggests he's not happy about it. He didn't watch Man United. He watched Aberdeen against Celtic.
I think he understands.
But do you think he accepts it? Do you think he accepts that at 82 he doesn't necessarily, if everything we're talking about, the wider sort of environment about the club, that, this is fair enough to some extent? Or do you feel he thinks he's been disrespected for everything that he's done for that club and been, with one of the greatest managers of all time?
I think he understands from within the context of that you've made a lot of other people redundant. I think if this was just a one-off move, that maybe he would feel like that was a little bit of a lack of respect, that you're just kind of targeting me and this role that I have. I don't really think you can defend being on 2 million a year in that role when really good people who have had a job at Man United for sort of 20 years have lost their job. I don't think you can really. I don't think you can defend it. Mark is right. I think it was quite pointed that he was at Aberdeen at the weekend and not sat in his usual seat at Man United after the news came out. The way that Man United have badged this is that he's also stepping back from other roles away from Man United. He was going to be 83 in December. He's getting old. He hasn't got the energy that he used to. He is cutting back on a lot of work commitments. That said, you can't get away from the fact that this is a cost-cutting measure. It's not that Fergie and INEOS have got together and said, I think it's time. And Fergie's gone, yeah, me too. It's very, very much a cost-cutting measure. I just don't think from Fergie's point of view that he can really defend being there on 2 million a year. I mean, he's classes himself as the ultimate working man, doesn't he? From Govan, worked on the shipyards, that kind of thing. You can't be sat there on 2 million a year when, not to go back to the people in the ticket office, but people there have lost jobs that they've had for 15 years. I think it's very, very difficult for him to kind of balance those two things. I'd say if it was a one-off cut and it was just him, I think he would probably maybe feel a little bit more disrespected than he does right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, even during his career when he was managing, there were times when he felt disrespected by the club in the sense that he wasn't paid what he should have been paid. And there was a time when he almost left before the treble season because his contract negotiations weren't going where they wanted to go. So he has over the years felt the club haven't looked after him, but he's got a stand named after him. He's got a statue outside that stand. He's the greatest manager the club's ever had. Like Rob said, he's proud of his socialist, background. So it wouldn't sit well if he was, talking about. He was a union leader back in the day in the shipyards. He was a toolmaker. He was a union rep. So it doesn't it would contradict with that completely if he was deciding that he wanted to remain on £2 million a year. None of us would be happy to take a £2 million a year, lose that sort of income. But at 82, I just think that he has to accept. And could it have been done better? Yeah, it could have been done better. I think if everyone was happy about it, it would have been a situation where Sir Alex might have said, "I'm stepping down from this role." He could have been the guy that looked like he was doing it as a kind of a gesture to the people that have been put out of work. It hasn't happened like that. But I've not been told of any situation where he's not happy about it. I've not been told he's happy about it. But I think if he was unhappy, we'd have heard the whispers by now that he was not too happy with how it was done. But I think he accepts it. He must accept it because the situation at the club demands that.